When you reach 60, something shifts. You begin to see time differently, not as something you chase, but something you cherish. You've spent decades working hard, raising a family, paying bills, and taking care of everyone else. You've done what needed to be done, even when it was hard, even when it cost you pieces of yourself. But now this is your time. Some call it retirement. Some call it reinvention. I call it reclamation. It's the moment when you get to reclaim your peace, your voice, your joy on your terms. But here's something nobody warns you about. Living well after 60 isn't just about what you do, it's also about what you stop doing. Because if you're still carrying the weight of outdated expectations, still saying yes when your heart says no, still putting off joy for someday, then you're not really free yet. Over the past 30 years, I've walked beside hundreds of older adults in my community, in hospice settings, in my own family. I've listened to the regrets, I've celebrated the awakenings, and I've seen firsthand what truly makes life beautiful after 60 and what quietly robs it. So today we're not talking about adding more, we're talking about letting go. Letting go of the fears, habits, pressures, and mindsets that no longer serve you. We'll explore 9 powerful shifts, things to stop doing that can open the door to a retirement that feels lighter, freer, and far more fulfilling. Along the way, I'll share stories, examples from real people just like you. People who learned that the path to joy isn't always about what you gain, but what you release. Stick with me until the end because the last lesson might just change how you wake up tomorrow morning. And if this speaks to you, if it reminds you of who you are and what you still deserve, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe. You've spent your life showing up for others. Now let's talk about how to show up for yourself. Let's begin. 1. Stop saving out of fear. Start spending on what fulfills you. For many of us who came of age in the 1950s, 60s or 70s, saving wasn't just a suggestion, it was a commandment. We were told, don't waste, save for a rainy day, hold on just in case. And that made sense back then. You saved because your next paycheck wasn't guaranteed, because one bad medical bill could sink you, because no one else was going to cover you when life got hard. And let's be clear that discipline got you through. It helped you raise a family. It helped you retire with dignity. It helped you weather storms. But now you're in a different season of life. You're not 35 anymore trying to pay off a mortgage with 2 kids in college. You're not chasing promotions or planning for someday. That someday it's arrived. And that's where the shift must begin. Because if you're over 60 and you've done the hard work to plan, budget, and build a retirement cushion, then continuing to live like you're one missed paycheck away from disaster might be stealing the very thing you worked so hard to secure your peace. To the trap of fear-based saving. Let's talk plainly. Fear-based saving is what happens when we've saved enough but we can't bring ourselves to use it. It's the man with a paid-off house, a pension, Social Security, and $500,000 in retirement savings, who still refuses to buy new shoes, who says no to every vacation, who clips coupons not because he enjoys it, but because he's scared of running out. And that fear is real. The AARP reports that nearly 60% of Americans over 60 worry they will outlive their savings even when the math shows they're financially secure. I met someone like this, Harold and Judith, a couple from upstate New York. Harold was a factory worker. Judith, a school secretary. They scrimped and saved for 40 years. Never ate out. Never took a trip longer than 3 days. When they retired, they had more than $1.2 million in savings, more than enough to last. But Judith once told me, every time I suggested we go on a cruise, Harold would get tense. He'd say, What if we get sick? What if we need that money later? You know what happened? Judith got sick, a form of leukemia. And by the time Harold was ready to say yes to that cruise, it was too late. That story is not rare. It's one I hear again and again. When is enough really enough? Here's the hard part about retirement. There's no alarm that tells you when you can finally stop worrying. No bell rings to announce you're secure. Go live your life. You have to make that decision. You have to choose to stop saving out of fear and start spending with purpose. There's a word for this: decumulation. It's the phase where your money is meant to support your lifestyle, not just sit untouched in an account. The National Institute on Aging explains that decumulation requires a mindset shift, one that feels emotional, not logical. You have to reframe your money not as something to hoard, but as a tool for dignity, joy, and fulfillment. So what's the solution? Let's get practical. Here's what I suggest. 1. Create a now fund. Take a portion of your savings, maybe 3 to 5%, and earmark it for experiences, upgrades, or small indulgences. Label it. Use this to enjoy your life. 2. Talk to a retirement planner. A professional can help you run the numbers, and sometimes hearing you're fine from someone objective helps calm the fear. 3. Start small. Don't buy a luxury RV tomorrow. But do start by saying yes to lunch with a friend. Or that day trip you've been putting off for years. 4. Build a list of joy investments, not just expenses, but investments in happiness. Examples: flying to see your grandchildren, a recliner that helps your back, hiring a cleaning service once a month, joining a watercolor class or local community center. 5. Reframe your what if so. Instead of what if I need this money later, ask, what if I never use this money at all? Because statistically speaking, millions of retirees die with over half their savings untouched, not because they didn't need it, but because they were afraid to enjoy it. Real-life reflection. A man I worked with named Robert, age 74, shared something that stuck with me. He said, "I spent my life preparing for my future, but I forgot to live in the present. Then one day I realized I was the future I'd been saving for." And with that, he booked a weekend at the coast with his wife. Nothing extravagant, just a small bed and breakfast by the water. He told me later, that weekend reminded me I'm not just surviving, I'm still here to live. Expert insight. According to the Mayo Clinic and the National Council on Aging, spending money on social engagement, travel, hobbies, and relaxation in later life is associated with improved cognitive health, reduced depression, and longer lifespan. Let that sink in. Using your money well doesn't reduce your security, it can increase your health. Closing thought for this habit. You've earned this chapter. Don't let fear make you miss it. You didn't work for decades just to watch your money grow old in an account. You worked so you could grow into someone who gets to enjoy a second act, one filled with connection, meaning, and the kind of joy you used to put off. So starting today, let go of saving out of fear and start spending on the life you've earned. One thoughtful, joyful moment at a time. 2. Stop spending on what doesn't bring you joy and start aligning every dollar with what truly matters. There's a curious thing about getting older. On one hand, you begin to realize you don't need as much as you once thought. You don't need more clothes, more gadgets, more stuff. But on the other hand, what you do want feels more important than ever. time with your grandchildren, a cozy space to rest, a meaningful conversation, the ability to wake up without dread or regret. And that's why this next shift matters. If you've stopped saving out of fear, the next thing to stop is spending out of habit. The hidden drain. Spending that's quietly misaligned. Too many older adults continue to spend money in ways that drain them, not support them. Not because they're reckless, but because they're stuck in patterns. Buying clothes they never wear just in case. Giving gifts out of obligation, not desire. Signing up for subscriptions or services they don't even use. Saying yes to family expenses they can't comfortably afford because they don't want to seem selfish. I met Diane, 72, who told me she spent over $200 a year on items from mail order catalogs. Not because she loved those items, but because she didn't want to let go of the identity she'd built as someone who always sends a card and a gift. But when she paused to reflect, she realized most of what she bought brought her no joy. She kept the habit, but lost the meaning. And that's the turning point. When you realize that money should serve your values, not your autopilot. What joy spending actually looks like. Let's clarify something. We're not talking about frivolous spending. We're not encouraging impulse buying or living beyond your means. What we're talking about is intentional spending. Spending that reflects your priorities, not your past. So what does joy-driven spending look like? Here are some examples. Traveling to surprise your sister for her birthday, not to impress her, but to reconnect. Replacing your worn-out shoes with supportive ones, not for fashion, but for mobility. Donating to a local children's book drive because literacy matters to you. Hiring a gardener for your yard. Not because you can't do it, but because you'd rather spend that energy with your grandkids. Taking your neighbor out for coffee every Sunday because community is priceless. In other words, you stop buying things to fill empty moments and start investing in moments that fill your spirit. A story that hits home. Years ago, I met Carol, a 70-year-old retired librarian in Vermont. She told me she'd been living on a modest fixed income and didn't consider herself rich. But she kept spending on things she never used: online deals, clearance items, seasonal decorations she didn't have space for. When she added it up one day, she'd spent over $3,000 in 1 year and couldn't name a single thing that had made her happier. Then she paused. She said, "But I do remember that $400 flight I took to visit my cousin for her 80th birthday. We sat up late, told stories from our childhood, laughed until our faces hurt. That weekend was everything." That's what stuck with her, not the stuff. Is how to shift from accidental to aligned spending. Here's how to turn this habit around. 1. Perform a joy audit of your expenses. Go through your bank statement from the last 2 months. Highlight the purchases that brought you lasting joy. Circle the ones you regret or forgot you made. Ask yourself, what do I want more of? What can I release? 2. Create a values budget. Instead of tracking categories like groceries and utilities alone, build a budget around what matters most to you. For example, connection travel dinners with loved ones, health classes, better food massage therapy, comfort home upgrades that make life easier, joy hobbies, music books. 3. Delay. Then decide when tempted to buy something, ask, will this bring me joy a week from now? Would I rather use this money for something else that aligns with my long-term fulfillment? 4. Make guilt-free cuts. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you're no longer buying holiday gifts for 17 relatives, or why you're canceling a monthly wine club that never brings you joy. Release the guilt, reclaim the peace. 5. Choose meaningful over automatic. Set a rule: if it doesn't have meaning, it doesn't get your money. This isn't about frugality, it's about freedom. Bichiking. Hear what the experts say. According to research published by the Harvard Study of Adult Development, one of the longest-running studies on aging in the world, the single biggest predictor of happiness in later life is the quality of our relationships, not our possessions. Spending time and money nurturing those connections has a longer-lasting positive effect than nearly any material purchase. And according to Senior Planet by AARP, purposeful spending also reduces cognitive stress. When your money and values align, you make decisions with more clarity and experience fewer regrets. Closing thought for this habit. As you move into this new phase of life, your money should not be a mirror of your past. It should be a reflection of your present and a compass for your future. So let go of the things that drain you. Let go of spending that comes from guilt, habit, or pressure. And instead, invest in what brings you peace, what connects you to others, what reminds you that life is still rich with wonder. Because after all the years you've given to everyone else, your joy is not a luxury. It's your birthright. 3. Stop trading time for money unless it still brings you purpose. Here's something that doesn't get said enough in retirement advice. Not everyone wants to stop working, but not everyone should keep working either. The key isn't in whether you keep working, it's in why. For most of your life, time and money were inseparable. You gave your time, hours, days, decades in exchange for income, stability, security. It was the contract you signed with the world, and you honored it even when it exhausted you. But when you cross that threshold into your 60s or beyond, something deeper starts to stir. You start to question, what is my time worth now? Not in dollars, but in meaning. Because here's the hard truth that many avoid. Time becomes more valuable the less of it you have left. When the old equation breaks down. Let's talk about Bob, a retired postal worker from St. Paul, Minnesota. Bob was 68 when I met him. He'd retired at 65, but within 6 months he picked up part-time work at a local hardware store. Not because he needed the money, his pension and Social Security covered his needs, but because he missed the routine, the people, the feeling of helping someone find the right tool. He told me, I'm not doing this to pay the bills, I'm doing it to stay connected. Bob was choosing to spend time in a way that still brought him joy, and that's what made it healthy. But I've also met dozens of others who kept clocking in because they didn't know how to stop. They didn't want the job anymore, but were afraid of the silence that might come without it. That's a different kind of choice. That's not freedom. That's fear disguised as productivity. Are you working out of passion or habit? Ask yourself these questions gently and honestly. Does my current work give me energy or drain it? Am I working because I want to or because I'm afraid of what will happen if I stop? Do I feel joy at the beginning of a workday or just relief when it ends? Would I keep doing this work if I didn't need the money? You see, the National Council on Aging reports that many seniors continue working after retirement age, not out of financial necessity, but out of identity loss. They don't know who they are without their job title, without their routine, without their usefulness. That's deeply human, but also deeply solvable, because identity and purpose don't end with a paycheck. What you trade time for changes. Everything. If you're going to give your time to something, let it be something that matters to you. Maybe that's a part-time job you love. Maybe it's volunteering at a local shelter. Maybe it's mentoring younger folks in your field. Maybe it's painting, reading, or helping care for your grandchildren. But if the thing you're doing is robbing you of your energy, your peace, or your presence, it might be time to rethink it. A real-life story. The teacher who let go. I once knew a high school teacher named Henry. He was beloved by his students. He taught English for 35 years. When he turned 62, everyone asked, "Are you retiring this year?" He'd smile and say, "Not yet." I still love it. He taught 3 more years. Then one day, after grading papers late into the night, he woke up with a thought, "I think I'm done." He didn't dread teaching. He just knew in his bones that it was time to step into something new. He retired that spring. He didn't stop working. He started writing. He used his mornings to write the stories he'd never had time for. He met with a group of retired educators once a week. He finally had lunch with his wife on a Wednesday without rushing. He told me later, "I traded a job I loved for time I now treasure." It wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. If you still love your work, keep going, but on your terms. Some people genuinely thrive in the structure of a job, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, continuing to work in retirement has health benefits. According to the Mayo Clinic, seniors who remain mentally active through part-time work or meaningful roles may experience slower cognitive decline and better overall mood. But the key word here is meaningful. If you're still working at 65, 70, or even 80, do it because it fills your cup, not because you're afraid to set it down. Signs. It might be time to let go. You feel resentment, not joy on work days. You fantasize about stopping, but never take the steps. You feel too tired to enjoy the rest of your life. You've stayed simply because it's what you've always done. These are not signs of failure. They're signs of transition. And transitions can be beautiful if you meet them with grace. Practical tips for navigating the shift. 1. Create a purpose list, not a to-do list, a why-do list. Write down what gives you energy, joy, and purpose. If your job is still on that list, great. If not, explore what could replace it. 2. Have a financial check-in. Work with a financial planner or a retirement counselor to understand your true options. You might be surprised to learn you can afford to step back sooner than you think. 3. Start a transition practice. If you're unsure about quitting entirely, consider reducing your hours, shifting to contract work, or phasing out over 6 to 12 months. 4. Let go of guilt. You are allowed to change paths. Letting go of a role does not mean letting go of your worth. Closing reflection for this habit. You spent your working years trading time for money and you did it honorably. But now, you get to trade time for something else: peace, freedom, exploration, presence. If your work still fuels you, wonderful. But if it no longer fits who you've become, then it's not just okay to stop. It's essential. Your time is the most precious thing you own, and every hour you spend on something that no longer serves you is an hour you never get back. So today, consider this. What would your life look like if you stopped trading your time for money and started trading it for meaning? 4. Stop putting off the experiences you've always wanted. Tomorrow isn't promised, but today is yours. There's a phrase you've likely said before, maybe more times than you'd like to admit: "I'll get to that someday. Someday I'll take that trip. Someday I'll write that book. Someday I'll go see my old friend again. Someday I'll learn the guitar, or join that class, or just finally sit and do nothing without guilt." And if you're like most people, you meant it. You weren't lying. You weren't avoiding. You were just waiting for a better time, for the house to be clean, for the weather to be just right, for your knees to stop aching, or for someone to come with you. But there's a hard truth that we don't talk about enough. Someday isn't a day on the calendar, and for many people, someday never comes. Ballman when later becomes too late. Let me tell you about Tom and Lillian, a couple from Oregon I met a few years ago. For over 2 decades, they'd talked about renting an RV and driving across the country. Tom was an Army veteran. Lillian had grown up on the East Coast and she wanted to visit the town her parents were buried in. They both worked hard their whole lives, raised kids, saved money. But every year something came up. One of their kids needed help. Tom had a small surgery. Lillian's sister fell ill. Then the pandemic hit. So they kept saying next year. But then came a diagnosis. Lillian's, a fast-moving cancer. And suddenly the dream faded into the background, replaced by appointments, medications, hospital visits. They never made the trip. And when I spoke to Tom later, he said something that stayed with me. I thought we had more time. We always think we have more time. Peter. The trap of perfectionism in retirement. Most people don't postpone experiences because they don't want them. They postpone them because they're waiting for conditions to be just right. Once I lose 10 pounds, I'll take that cruise. Once I pay off that last debt, I'll join the group trip. Once I get new knees, I'll start hiking again. But here's what research in life shows us. If we wait for perfect conditions, we risk missing imperfect but beautiful opportunities. Dr. Susan Blakemore of Harvard Health notes that retirees who consistently delay joy in pursuit of readiness experience higher rates of regret and isolation than those who embrace good enough moments in the present. You don't need a 5-star plan. You need a single step forward. Dom, what have you been putting off? Take a breath and ask yourself, what experience has been sitting on your heart for years? What dream have you shelved, not because it's impossible, but because it's inconvenient? It doesn't need to be a trip around the world. Sometimes it's as simple as calling that cousin you haven't spoken to in 10 years, taking a painting class at the senior center, singing at karaoke for the first time in your life, writing your life story for your grandchildren, walking to the lake and sitting in silence for half an hour. These are the things we put off until we look up and realize time has stolen our chance. Real-life turnaround, Joan's dance. Joan, 76, was a widow from South Carolina. She told me she used to watch old ballroom dancing shows with her husband on Saturday nights. After he passed, she always said, maybe I'll take a dance class someday. But for 6 years, she didn't. One day, her granddaughter said, Grandma, I think he'd love to see you dance again. Joan signed up for a beginner class that same month. She didn't glide like Ginger Rogers. She didn't wear fancy heels. But every Thursday evening, she showed up in her sneakers and smiled more than she had in years. Joan didn't wait until her body was stronger. She danced with what she had, and it changed everything. Action steps to say yes to life again. If you want to stop postponing the life you deserve, here are a few ways to begin. 1. Write a not someday today list. Forget a bucket list that feels too big. Instead, write down 5 things you could realistically do in the next 30 days. Even small things like eating dinner outside or watching the sunrise with a loved one. 2. Tell one person. Your plan accountability matters. When you say your goal out loud, even if it's just, I want to go to the local museum again, it becomes real. 3. Book it before you're ready. Sometimes the commitment needs to come first. Reserve the seat, join the class, buy the train ticket. Let the details work themselves out. 4. Give yourself permission to be unpolished. You don't need the perfect outfit. You don't need the perfect reason. You just need the willingness to try. 5. Remember the regret test. When in doubt, ask yourself, if I don't do this now, will I regret it 5 years from today? That answer is usually clearer than you think. Expert insight. The power of new experiences. After 60. According to the National Institute on Aging, older adults who actively engage in new meaningful experiences, even small ones, experience improved memory, greater emotional well-being, and increased longevity. That's right. Trying new things actually protects your brain and enhances quality of life. Your brain craves novelty. Not chaos, just change. So don't stop exploring. Closing reflection for this habit. The truth is simple. You don't get to control how many years you have left, but you do get to control what you do with the ones still ahead. If your heart is pulling you towards something, listen. Don't wait for someone else to tell you it's okay. Don't wait for a perfect time that doesn't exist. Take the trip, call the friend, write the poem, visit the park, join the choir, walk the trail. Say yes, because the memories you've been waiting to make, they've been waiting for you too. 5. Stop neglecting your health, because it's the key to everything else. Let's have a serious, tender conversation, not about money, not about work, not about dreams, but about your body, your knees, your heart, your breath, your energy when you wake up in the morning, the way your hands feel after a long day. Because here's the truth, no matter how beautiful your home is, no matter how much money you've saved, no matter how many vacations are on your list, none of it matters if you don't feel well enough to enjoy it. You're the most overlooked asset. After 60, many people plan for retirement like it's a math equation. How much do I need? How long will it last? What's my drawdown strategy? But very few people stop and ask, how many healthy years do I have left? Not just years, healthy years. The National Institute on Aging calls this your health span, the part of your life where you're still mobile, still sharp, still engaged, and still enjoying the world on your own terms. Your health span is what determines how many hikes you take, how many games of catch you play with your grandkids, how many sunsets you watch from your porch, not from a hospital bed. It's the most important asset you own. And it's the one we tend to ignore until it's already slipping away. Why neglect happens and why it's not your fault. If you've been putting off checkups, avoiding the scale, or skipping the walk around the block, I want you to hear this. You're not lazy. You're not weak. You're not too old to care. You're human. Maybe you've spent decades prioritizing everyone else's needs before your own. Maybe you're discouraged by past health scares or diagnoses. Maybe the changes feel too big, the hill too steep. I get it, but there's good news here. In fact, there's great news. According to Mayo Clinic and Harvard Health, even small lifestyle changes after 60, yes, even now, can significantly improve energy, mobility, cognitive sharpness, and independence. You don't need to run marathons. You don't need to switch to a diet of steamed broccoli and lemon water. You just need to start paying attention and taking small, kind steps toward your own wellness. A story that might sound familiar. I remember a man named Edward. He was 74 when we met. Retired postal worker, widowed, lived alone in a quiet neighborhood. He told me he hadn't seen a doctor in 3 years. I'm not trying to find out bad news, he said. But here's the thing. The bad news had already started. He was sleeping poorly. He had no appetite. His knees ached and he was afraid to drive at night because of blurry vision. One day he nearly fainted while mowing the lawn. That was the wake-up call. He went to the doctor, got diagnosed with a vitamin B12 deficiency, early-stage glaucoma, and mild dehydration. Nothing terminal, nothing irreversible. Just conditions that had crept in quietly unnoticed like rust on a car. With a few changes, supplements, more hydration, better sleep, shorter walks every morning, Edward felt better in 3 months than he had in years. He didn't get younger, but he felt younger. Simple, sustainable ways to prioritize your health. You don't need to overhaul your life. You just need to begin. Here are 5 things you can do starting today to stop neglecting your health. 1. See your doctor, even if you feel fine. The National Council on Aging recommends annual wellness visits after 65, even for those with no chronic conditions. Many illnesses are treatable in early stages, but only if caught early. 2. Walk, even just 10 minutes a day. Walking is one of the most underrated tools for longevity. According to Harvard Health Publishing, a daily walk can reduce the risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and cognitive decline. 3. Drink water, like it's medicine. Older adults are more prone to dehydration, which can cause fatigue, dizziness, and confusion. Set a reminder. Use a cup with measurements. Flavor it with lemon or cucumber if plain water bores you. 4. Stretch. Every morning tight muscles can cause imbalance falls and discomfort. Simple chair stretches or standing balance exercises improve circulation, mobility, and posture. 5. Fuel your body, not just feed it. Try this rule: 1 fruit or veggie at every meal. You don't need to become vegan, but adding more whole, colorful foods will do more for your energy and immune system than any vitamin bottle ever could. Nabal. Get your expert insight. Health is the foundation of everything else. A 2022 Cleveland Clinic study found that older adults who engaged in light movement, ate a balanced diet, and maintained regular sleep patterns were significantly less likely to report depressive symptoms or physical dependence by age 75. In other words, health is not just physical, it's emotional, it's relational, it's your ticket to the life you still want to live. A personal moment of reflection. You may not have the body you had at 40, but you still have a body worth honoring. It's carried you through decades of storms. It's held your children, danced at weddings, recovered from surgeries. It's been your home. Maybe it's time to take care of it like it's sacred, because it is. Closing reflection for this habit. There is no greater investment you can make in your 60s, 70s, or 80s than investing in your health. It's not about vanity. It's not about perfection. It's about power. The power to walk into a room with confidence. The power to say yes to the trip, the party, the class, the joy. So make that appointment. Lace up those shoes. Drink the water. Eat the soup with spinach. Take the nap. Stretch your arms towards the sky. Because the greatest gift you can give yourself and the people who love you is a you that still feels strong, steady, and fully present. Your body has served you. Now it's time to serve it. 6. Stop worrying about what other people think. You've earned the right to live authentically. This might be the most liberating thing you'll hear all day. You don't owe anyone an explanation for who you are anymore. Not for how you dress, not for what you enjoy, not for how you spend your time, your money, or your energy. After 60, you've earned the right to be unapologetically you. but too many people still carry the weight of others' expectations, like invisible luggage they've been dragging since childhood. Why it's so hard to let go. For decades, many of us were conditioned to keep the peace, to be polite, to blend in, to avoid judgment, to make sure we were never too much or too little of anything. You may have lived as the dependable spouse, the quiet caregiver, the one who sacrificed, compromised, and stayed small to avoid rocking the boat. But here's the truth. At this stage of life, shrinking yourself for the comfort of others is no longer noble. It's costly. It costs you peace. It costs you presence. It costs you time, the most valuable currency you have left. Kakasakura story of art and courage. Let me tell you about a woman named Eileen. She was 67 when I met her, a retired nurse, widowed, a grandmother of 5. She told me that since childhood she had dreamed of being an artist, but her parents discouraged it. Her husband called it a silly hobby, and her kids didn't really get it. So for decades, her paint sat in a box under the bed. Until one day she opened them. She joined a beginner's art class at the community center. She wore colorful scarves. She started painting sunrises, her favorite time of day. When I asked how she finally gave herself permission, she said, "I realized I didn't need anyone else's permission anymore." That's the kind of power that lives inside you if you're willing to claim it. Kum. Here's what happens when you stop caring what others think. You wear what feels good, not what's trendy. You say no when your body says no. You say yes to things others think are silly because they bring you joy. You stop attending events out of obligation. You spend your days with people who lift you up, not those who drain you. And slowly the fear of judgment fades. Because the older you get, the more you realize most people aren't really thinking about you anyway. They're too busy thinking about themselves. So why waste your one precious life chasing approval that no one's even withholding? Now, how to start letting go of other people's opinions. If you've spent years being the good girl, the reliable son, the quiet peacekeeper, this won't change overnight. But it can change. Here's how. 1. Notice the voice. That little voice that says, "What will they think?" Recognize it. It's not your truth. It's your training. 2. Ask whose opinion is this really? Is it a parent's voice from 40 years ago, a church member who made one offhand comment, a friend who meant well but never really saw you? 3. Practice micro-bravery. Say no to a gathering you don't enjoy. Wear the bright red sweater, sing loudly, dance slowly. Let people wonder. 4. Use this mantra. If it brings me peace, it doesn't need permission, because your peace matters more than someone else's opinion. 5. Surround yourself with people who see the real you. Join groups or communities where authenticity is welcome, not judged. Volunteer with others who've walked similar paths. Find one friend who listens without fixing. That support will give you strength. Buck what the research says. A study from the AARP and Senior Planet found that people over 60 who embrace their individuality, even when it went against expectations, reported higher life satisfaction, greater resilience, and stronger social connections than those who continued to play it safe. In other words, the more authentic you are, the happier and healthier you become. You don't have to be loud. Just true. Letting go of others' opinions doesn't mean becoming a rebel. It doesn't mean pushing people away or making dramatic declarations. It simply means living in alignment with yourself. Quiet confidence, soft boundaries, simple joys. Maybe you read romance novels. Maybe you love sci-fi movies. Maybe you wear sneakers to church. Maybe you say no to volunteering because your body needs rest. That's not selfish. That's sacred self-respect. Menab, a final reflection for this habit. There's a hospice nurse named Bronnie Ware who wrote about the regrets of the dying. The number one regret she heard: I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Let that settle in for a moment. Let it remind you that it's not too late, that you are not too old, that your life is still unfolding and you get to be the one turning the pages now. So starting today, stop worrying about what they think. Start listening to what you know. You've earned that freedom, and there's nothing more beautiful than someone finally being themselves fully, boldly, gently in the years they used to think were only for fading. 7. Stop watching the doom and gloom. Protect your peace. Not just your knowledge. Let's begin this section with a gentle but honest question. When was the last time you turned off the news and felt better? Not more informed, not more responsible, just better. If you're like most people over 60, you were raised to value awareness. You probably grew up in a time when the evening news was a trusted ritual. Walter Cronkite on the screen, a calm voice reporting the day's events. But things have changed. Now the news doesn't just inform, it invades. It doesn't just explain, it exaggerates. And in doing so, it often replaces curiosity with fear and concern with paralysis. Kauai seniors are especially vulnerable to media overload. You see, older adults are statistically among the most loyal news consumers in America. But according to the Pew Research Center, they're also more likely to suffer from the side effects of media saturation. Increased anxiety, sleeplessness, hopelessness about the future, a sense of constant unease even in personal life. And let's be honest, the news isn't designed to make you feel good. It's designed to keep you watching, because fear sells. That's not your fault. It's the way modern media is built: 24-hour coverage, breaking alerts, flashing banners, opinion panels, shouting at each other like it's a sport. And if you're taking it all in day after day, you may not realize how much it's shaping your mood, your view of the world, and even your health. A story. Bill's News Fast Bill was a 70-year-old widower I met in Georgia. He was a smart man, read the paper every day, watched cable news for 2 or 3 hours at night. But when I visited him one spring, he looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally. I can't stop worrying, he said, about the government, the markets, the climate. Everything feels like it's falling apart. So I gently suggested an experiment, a 1-week news fast. Instead of TV news, he listened to old jazz records. Instead of scrolling news sites, he read mystery novels and sat on the porch with neighbors. When I saw him again a week later, he smiled differently. I feel like I've been breathing with my lungs full again, he said. Like I finally got my mind back. Bill didn't bury his head in the sand. He just stopped feeding his spirit with daily dread. Check the emotional cost of constant outrage. You don't have to be a doctor to know what chronic stress does to the body. But just in case you need a reminder, according to Mayo Clinic and Harvard Health, elevated stress hormones like cortisol contribute to high blood pressure, impaired sleep, weakened immune function, memory decline, increased risk of depression and anxiety. And when does cortisol rise? When we feel afraid, overwhelmed, helpless. Now think about what the news wants you to feel all the time. Fear, overwhelm, helplessness. Do the math. Idri. This doesn't mean ignorance. It means boundaries. You're not being asked to live in a bubble. Staying informed matters. But so does knowing when enough is enough. So here's what I recommend. 5 ways to stay informed without losing peace. 1. Set a news schedule. Limit your news intake to once a day, ideally not before bed. Pick a reputable source. Read or watch for 30 minutes, then turn it off. 2. Choose print or online. Over cable studies show cable news heightens emotional arousal more than reading the same stories in print. 3. Balance the negative with the positive. For every half hour of hard news, follow it with 30 minutes of something uplifting. A favorite book, a comedy show, a nature walk, phone call with a grandchild, music that soothes your heart. 4. Filter out sensationalism. Avoid media that uses words like chaos, crisis, or disaster in every headline. Stick to outlets that value clarity over panic. 5. Remember what you can actually control. You can vote. You can volunteer. You can call a neighbor. Beyond that, remind yourself you don't carry the weight of the world, just your corner of it. Reclaiming the joy in everyday life. The news makes the world feel like it's burning, but here's what doesn't make headlines. A neighbor quietly paying a grocery bill for someone behind them, a group of retirees planting a community garden, a 7-year-old helping their grandpa fix the screen door. Someone like you taking a walk, feeling the sun, deciding to be a little lighter than yesterday. Those things still happen. Every day, the world isn't just falling apart, it's still coming together in quiet, ordinary moments of goodness. But to see them, you have to lift your eyes from the screen. Wah! Closing reflection for this habit. If you feel tired, tense, or cynical after watching the news, that's your body talking to you. And it might be time to listen. You've spent a lifetime being vigilant, informed, and responsible. Now it's time to be well. Turn off the noise, look out the window, call someone you love, walk outside barefoot, watch the birds. Listen to a favorite song from your younger years. The world might still be messy, but your peace doesn't have to be. Because after 60, the best thing you can protect is your inner calm. 8. Stop ignoring your financial plan, but also stop obsessing over it. Let's talk about money, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of peace of mind. Because after 60, your relationship with money becomes less about accumulation and more about clarity, confidence, freedom. Yet so many people fall into one of 2 traps. They either ignore their finances entirely, or they obsess over every dollar until joy becomes impossible. Let's explore both and find the balance you truly deserve. The trap. The "I'll deal with it later" approach. Some folks avoid their finances altogether. They don't open statements. They don't meet with a planner. They say things like, "I don't want to know," or "It's too late to change anything." But here's the problem. Ignoring your financial life doesn't protect you. It just creates more uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds fear. That fear then trickles into every decision you try to make. Should I take that trip? Can I afford to help my daughter? What happens if I need long-term care? The National Council on Aging found that older adults with low financial literacy, regardless of income level, reported higher levels of daily stress and reduced emotional well-being. In short, when you don't know where you stand financially, everything feels risky. Trap. 2. The spreadsheet paralysis approach. On the other end of the spectrum, some seniors check their balances every morning. They analyze tax brackets in their sleep. They won't spend $40 on lunch without recalculating their retirement horizon. This might seem responsible, but at some point it becomes a form of control-driven anxiety. I once worked with a man named Carl. He had over $1 million in assets, no debt, a paid-off home, but he would panic about tipping 20% at restaurants. He'd skip birthdays because the gas money adds up. His wife once said, "We have money, but we're not living." That's the other side of fear, the fear of letting go. But the truth, money is a tool, not a chain. Let's take a breath and remember you worked hard for decades. You saved. You sacrificed. You didn't build your financial life just to watch numbers grow. You built it so you could have options, so you could sleep without worry. Say yes to opportunities. Help your family. Treat yourself with dignity. And that only happens when you stop avoiding the numbers and stop obsessing over them and start using them as a tool for living well. How to build a healthy, peaceful relationship with your money. Here's how to walk the middle path, one that's honest and freeing. 1. Know your enough number. This is the amount you need each month to live your version of a good life. Housing, food, healthcare, hobbies, travel, not just to survive, but to enjoy. Work with a financial professional or use trusted online tools like AARP's Retirement Calculator to find your baseline. 2. Check in regularly, but not obsessively. Pick one day a month to review your accounts. Write it on the calendar. Make it a routine. Then let it go the other 29 days. 3. Identify joy spending versus stress spending. Ask yourself, am I spending out of guilt or fear? Or am I using this money to live with meaning? When you make choices aligned with your values, regret disappears. 4. Have a plan for emergencies. Then release the what-ifs. Yes, prepare for medical costs, long-term care, inflation. But once the plan is in place, don't live every day like a disaster is around the corner. Hope is just as important as caution. 5. Revisit and adjust annually. Life changes. So should your financial plan. Each year, revisit your goals. Adjust your spending. Celebrate progress. Remember, your plan should serve you, not scare you. Your real-life reflection. Margaret's turning point. Margaret, 71, was a retired teacher from Illinois. She had always let her husband handle the finances. After he passed, she felt overwhelmed, terrified of making a mistake. She didn't spend a dime for 6 months, not on herself, not on her home. Finally, her son sat with her, pulled up her accounts, and gently said, "Mom, you're okay. You have more than enough." With help from a financial counselor, Margaret created a simple plan. She began donating to causes she loved. She bought a new chair for her reading nook, and that fall she flew to Boston to see the leaves change a dream she'd put off for 20 years. It wasn't about money, she said. It was about permission. In what the experts say. According to Harvard Health Publishing, financial confidence in retirement is directly linked to lower rates of anxiety, depression, and even physical symptoms like insomnia and chronic pain. And the AARP notes that older adults who talk openly about money, even if they don't have a high-income report, stronger social connections and better decision-making. In other words, understanding your money leads to peace. Fearing it leads to paralysis. Closing reflection for this habit. So stop ignoring your money. Stop letting it sit in the dark, gathering confusion. Shine a light. Get help. Ask questions, but also stop obsessing. Let go of the belief that every dollar must be controlled, because you're not here to serve your finances. They're here to serve you. Make room for generosity. Make room for joy. Make room for that dinner with friends, for that weekend trip, for the concert ticket, the museum pass, the new pair of walking shoes. Because at this point in life, your security doesn't come from your balance sheet. It comes from knowing you're using what you have to live like your life still matters. Because it does. 9. Stop living. Like you have forever, time is the most precious currency. There's something strange about getting older. The days can feel long, but the years, they vanish like morning mist. One minute you're planning your retirement, the next you're wondering how a decade went by. If there's one lesson I've heard over and over again from people in their 70s, 80s, even 90s, it's this: I wish I had spent more time living and less time waiting. Waiting until the house was clean. Waiting until the money was better. Waiting until someone called. Until the weather changed. Until they felt ready. But here's the truth no one tells you in your 60s. There's no such thing as the perfect time. The perfect time to start painting again, to take that trip, to call your sister, to forgive that grudge, to learn a language, a song, a story. The perfect time is now, because after 60, your life isn't on pause, it's on precious, irreplaceable play. To Sagava to the cost of waiting. Let me tell you a story. Ronald was 74 when I met him. A kind man, a lifelong accountant, widowed, 3 kids. He always talked about going to Yellowstone. It was his dream. Something about the mountains and sky just called to him. Every spring he'd say, next year. I just need to finish the taxes for one more client, clean out the garage, reorganize the pantry. Then I'll go. He never went. By the time he finally had the free time, he'd developed heart issues and limited mobility. He told me quietly, I spent my life saving time for later, but I didn't realize later doesn't always come. His words have never left me. What are you waiting for? This isn't meant to be grim. It's meant to be freeing. Because there's something incredibly liberating about realizing that this right here, right now is your life. This moment, this breath, this conversation. No, you may not have the energy you had at 30. No, your knees may not hike 5 miles. No, you may not travel like you once hoped. But what you do have, wisdom, clarity, presence, is something younger people can't even begin to understand. You have the ability to choose how you spend your time, to prioritize connection, purpose, joy, stillness, and that power. That's wealth. Let go of someday, thinking someday I'll call her, someday I'll start writing, someday I'll visit Italy, someday I'll clean out the attic, someday I'll wear that red dress. Here's your reminder. Someday is a thief. It steals today. It steals your vitality. It replaces presence with procrastination. Instead, ask yourself every morning, what will make this day feel meaningful? Maybe it's something small. Watering the garden, dancing in your kitchen, calling your granddaughter. Maybe it's something bold, booking that weekend trip, joining a dance class, starting a memoir. Whatever it is, do it, or at least take the first step. Calc what experts say about time perception. After 60. According to a study from the National Institute on Aging, our perception of time accelerates as we get older because each year becomes a smaller percentage of our total lived experience. That's why your 70s can feel faster than your 40s, even if you're less busy. The Harvard study of adult development, the longest-running happiness study in history, found that people who filled their later years with intention and connection, not busyness, lived longer and reported more satisfaction. In short, it's not how much time you have, it's how you use it. Closing story. The gift of today. Estelle, a 69-year-old artist in Arizona, lost her husband suddenly. She told me I realized I'd spent years putting off joy. We were always going to travel next year, start painting together next year, take the train across the Rockies. But next year never came. After his passing, she picked up her paintbrush again. She started a senior art group at her local community center. She now teaches watercolor to beginners on Thursdays and says, "This is what he would have wanted for me to live." And here's what she told the group one afternoon. "We're not running out of time. We're running into it. Every day we wake up is a second chance to live on purpose." Final reflection. Time is your most precious resource. So stop living like you have forever. Stop postponing joy. Stop waiting for the stars to align. Because life after 60 isn't the end of the story, it's a chapter rich with meaning, memory, and possibility. Let yourself write it boldly. Start the thing. Make the call. Book the trip. Learn the song. Wear the color. Say the words. Forgive the past. Dance anyway. Speak kindly. Rest deeply, because the most powerful decision you can make at any age is to live fully now. Let's take a breath and look back. We've walked through 9 powerful shifts, not just things to stop doing, but burdens to set down so you can finally feel light again. You've earned your peace. You've earned your freedom. You've earned the right to choose how you want to live from this moment forward. And the best part, it's never too late. If this message resonated with you, here's what I ask. Click the like button to let me know this mattered. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more real-life guidance for your next chapter. Because you're not alone. There's a whole community of us wise, courageous, still growing, learning how to live well together after 60. And we're just getting started.